Hey everyone, and welcome back to Exposed Scandalous Files of the Elite. I'm your host, Jim Chapman, and today I am bringing you two critical updates on some current cases that I have covered recently on this podcast, and they relate to some new information regarding the investigation into the death of Brianna Aguilera, who allegedly jumped 17 stories to her death in Texas, as well as some updates regarding my podcast just last week covering the arrest of vascular surgeon Dr. Thomas McKee for the double murder of Dr. Spencer and Monique Tepe. And I'm going to start with the latter. And look, very fluid case. More facts are coming out from the family. Now, as I told you, police, they will likely not comment on this case any further until the trial, but others have spoke up, and so we're learning a little bit more. So let me give you some insight into what I have learned and heard, and the first thing I'm going to tell you about that has been confirmed is that the divorce of McKee and Monique Tepe was accidentally reopened by the Franklin County Clerk of Courts in June of 2025, believe it or not, due to a docketing mistake. Now, many people are thinking that this could have triggered McKee, and I need to go ahead and dispel that one. Now, according to those in the know, neither McKee nor Tepe were even informed that this error existed. So they had no idea about it. With that in mind, this did not trigger anything as it relates to the murders. You can't get triggered if you don't know this even occurred, and I can say this having an extreme amount of confidence. So the mistake for sure occurred, but no one involved was aware of it. There's also a question of how he got in the house that is still coming up. And just my opinion on this, but we, as in the general public, we still don't know. And I don't think until the trial we will know. As a matter of fact, I'm not so sure the police will even know at this point how McKee got in the house. McKee took the fifth when he was interrogated. He didn't say anything. He asked for a lawyer right off the bat, and probably the smartest thing that he's done this whole case. Now, unless they have some surveillance footage showing this guy getting into the house, I don't know if anyone has that answer yet. Now, I will say that at least in my opinion, in my mind, after hearing from Monique's family how verbally abusive this guy was and how she had very much feared him, I personally have all but ruled out that this dude simply knocked on a door. Some people have kind of hypothesized about that. I mean, they have Ring cameras. Common sense tells me that even if the dude popped his hood up and turned his back to the Ring camera, who's going to open the door at 3 or 4 in the morning? It ain't going to happen, in my opinion. Many are asking if there were any recent contact between Monique and McKee, and that appears more and more unlikely. Family that have been interviewed seem very confident that had Monique even seen McKee in the past few years, much less recently, that she would have told them, and according to multiple family members, they are unaware of any contact between these two. Many are asking if the dog barked. And remember, y'all, this couple had a golden doodle. I have friends that have golden doodles. They are the sweetest dogs ever. Very loving, but also huge dogs, giant dogs, and they do bark. And I would guess that the dogs barked, but I would also say that no one knows this. And I have not heard of any neighbors reporting hearing a dog barking. Doesn't mean it didn't happen, but nobody's reported that as of yet. Now let's get into the travel, because that's been a question with regard to Dr. McKee traveling the 7 hours on the night of the murders and whether he was visiting family or not. I still personally have no idea. Now, I've seen some reporting that he worked the day of the killings and then made the drive up to the residence. Now, from what I understand, that's from an anonymous source. I mean, it could happen. It's certainly possible. The hospital, I promise you, will not release that information, meaning whether he worked or not that day. And I can promise you that the hospital likely has met with the employees. You can get fired for saying anything about this guy's schedule. But a patient sure could spill the beans if someone had, him working on them, doing some sort of doctor visit with him on the day of the murders. They could certainly say something about that. But as far as the official record of that, I haven't come across anything that says that he worked and then drove all the way up there. Now, just a quick side note on how a hospital would handle this, at least the one that my wife works at, when things much less concerning than this occur, they'll meet with these employees. And if you're ever caught sharing information regarding a coworker that's involved in a crime or even a patient's visiting information, that's like automatic termination. And I'll tell you something interesting that happened at the hospital my wife worked at. Britney Spears, of all people, was actually coming in to see a doctor. I'm not going to say for what reason, but she was coming in to see a doctor, and it had gotten around the hospital. So the day that Britney Spears came in for this procedure, there were paparazzi everywhere. People that worked there had invited like their sisters, for example, up there just to see Britney walk by, and the hospital lost it, and a lot of people got fired that day. So they take that very serious. Now, with regard to the vehicle, let's get into that. There's still no confirmation on whose vehicle it was. Many assume that it was his personal vehicle, but I've heard everything from it was a borrowed vehicle from a friend. I've heard that he possibly stole a car. Again, we don't know. I've even heard, although I've also heard it's been dispelled, that he had a rental car. We don't know at this point. No one has confirmed anything one way or the other. Let's talk about gunshot residue quickly, because I had someone ask me in the comments about GSR residue, which GSR or gunshot residue is also known as powder burns. And it's essentially where microscopic gunpowder gets on your hands when you fire a weapon. And my thoughts on this, I don't think this is going to play into the evidence. First, too much time had passed. Nearly 2 weeks before they arrested this guy, and GSR is going to start leaving your hands, y'all, within like 5 hours. Second, this guy is a surgeon. How many times do you think he washes his hands in a day? Probably 10 plus times. I don't think he had any powder burns. As a matter of fact, I know he didn't at the point that he got arrested. Now, it may play a role with regard to the vehicle. There could have been some transfer to the cloth seats of gunshot residue or the steering wheel, but that just ties him to shooting a gun. Doesn't tie him to shooting a gun in the commission of these murders. So he could just say he went target practicing one day, and that's why gunshot residue was in that car. So my point to all that is I don't think it's going to play any form of significant role in this case. What I do think is that police will be following a pretty significant paper trail. Now, you may wonder, how are most domestic murders like this solved? And it may surprise you to know that over 80% of these are solved by checking the suspect's Google search history. And I'll bet you that plays a prominent role here. Did he map out an area that night on Google prior to him driving there? All kinds of things. Did he search on Google, how do you get away with murder? Believe it or not, people do that. That will play a significant role, I think, in this case. Cell phone pings also play a role, but he may have pulled a Koberger on this one and turned off his cell phone, or even smarter for him, if he were to do something like this, left it at home and left it on to where it would ping that he was at a different location at the time of the murders. I haven't heard if cell phone pings have played a role, and I don't think we're going to know until this comes out in a trial. One other significant thing that came out was that this guy was no stranger to guns. Police found several of them on his property. Now, on its face, that doesn't mean much. I mean, I have a ton of guns, but he definitely had access to guns, and that matters when it comes to two people being shot. I just don't think that's something that you can kind of hang your hat on as a prosecution. You know, for me, the nail in the coffin for this guy more than anything else is going to be the ballistics match that they were able to make, where they match the bullet casings to his particular gun. Remember, I told you in the previous episode about the striations that are made in the bullet casings, and they were able to match that to him. I don't think there's any way on God's green earth you can explain why you were in possession of a gun that was proved to be the gun that was used to kill two people. For me, if I'm a juror, that case is closed at that point with a big fat guilty verdict. I don't think you really necessarily need anything else. They have more, I'm sure, but that's a big one. Now, an indictment also came out in the last few days. And first of all, this indictment was super fast, man. At the time that I'm recording this, he has not even been extradited back to Ohio, but they've already got an indictment secured for him. And I'm going to go over this indictment just really quickly. He has one count of aggravated murder, and that was for the murder of Monique Tepe. He also has one count of aggravated murder for the murder of Spencer Tepe. Then he has a third count of aggravated murder and a fourth count of aggravated murder, both for Monique and Spencer Tepe. And the question here is, and this is where it can get really confusing, and that is, how can you charge him with 4 counts of murder in the murder of 2 people? And it's really in the details. I'm not going to get too far into the weeds on this one, but what I can tell you is it matters from the aspect of the penalty phase of the case. So there's aggravated murder, and then there's aggravated murder under extreme circumstances, and those are actually 2 different charges. And so they combine all this, and that's how you get the 4 charges. I know that's very hard to follow, but trust me, this is a tactic in the court system used to ensure that you get the maximum sentence. So that is why that is. He also has a count of burglary added to this. So he has a total of 5 counts for his role in this. And I do need to say quickly that also mentioned in this indictment is the fact that he used a silencer. Now, how do they know that? Well, if they have the gun after the fact that they caught him with and they were able to match those striations and it had a silencer on it, they know it was likely used in the actual killings. Now, on its face, again, doesn't mean a whole lot. A lot of people have mufflers for their weapons. I have several weapons that I have mufflers with. They are rifles, and the reason I place those mufflers on there is because when I'm target practicing and I have people next to me, it's really as a courtesy to them. It's just not as loud when I fire the rifle, but it's certainly loud enough on a rifle to where you're going to hear it well away from where the crime is taking place itself. So this is likely a different scenario in that he had a muffler or a silencer on a pistol. A little bit different scenario there. We've all seen the movies where it's that pew sound. That's what that sounds like, and that is a little nefarious. So that's what I have for you relative to an update in the Tepe double murder case. Now, the next update that I'm going to bring you is in regard to the case of Brianna Aguilera. And a couple of things. First, if you have not listened to my coverage on this case, I'm going to link the original episode of Brianna's in the show notes and description of this episode. And second, if you've already listened to that one, you may recall that I had some major questions as it related to that case. I just flat out did not believe that this girl, and I do not believe currently that this Texas A&M star student with nothing but a bright future ahead of her jumped to her death from a 17-story building. I just don't buy it. That dog don't hunt with me. So the first update on this one is a lawsuit that came out on behalf of the family of Brianna Aguilera against several entities. I'm going to cover that quickly for you. It's not that long. And it reads, quote, "It is illegal to serve minors any amount of alcohol in the state of Texas. It is reckless and irresponsible to grossly overserve a group of minors at a University of Texas football tailgate to the point where the minors lose their physical faculties and ability to control themselves." Sadly, that's exactly what the defendants did herein. And they're suing. And when I say they, Stephanie Rodriguez and Manuel Aguilera on behalf of Brianna Aguilera, and that is the parents of Brianna Aguilera, they are suing the actual Austin Black Rugby and UT Latin Economics and Business Association. That's who owned that particular tailgate. So I'll move on. It has become necessary to bring this suit because the defendant's egregious illegal overserving of minors, which ultimately led to the death of 19-year-old college student Brianna Aguilera, which occurred on November 28, 2025. Brianna traveled to Austin, Texas to enjoy the hallmark SEC college football game between University of Texas and Texas A&M. She and several of her friends traveled to Austin to see one another and spend time together at festivities surrounding the football game. Brianna planned to attend the tailgate at defendant Austin Black's rugby club facility near Walnut Creek. The tailgate was hosted by defendant UTLEBA. Based on present information and belief, Brianna purchased a ticket by an event promoter which assisted to hosting the tailgate. According to witnesses, approximately 300 tickets were sold to the tailgate party. The tailgate took place in the parking lot of defendant Austin Black's rugby club. The tailgate served alcohol for a large crowd of patrons to enjoy prior to the football game scheduled that evening. At approximately 6 p.m., Brianna arrived to the tailgate with several friends. According to witnesses, Brianna, amongst many other minors, was served alcohol by defendant UTLEBA tailgate. After a brief time period, witness described Brianna as noticeably intoxicated. Brianna and her minor friends remained at the tailgate for several hours. During this time, defendants continued serving them alcohol. As Brianna consumed more alcohol, witness described her behavior shifting from upbeat to disoriented and ultimately grossly intoxicated. Brianna began to stumble at the tailgate and lose physical faculties. According to police, she exhibited classic signs of intoxication. Based on present information and belief, witnesses had to assist Brianna with walking and standing at times. Eventually, Brianna stumbled into the woods and lost her cell phone, all while suffering an incredible effect of too much alcohol for a 19-year-old. After becoming too intoxicated, Brianna, with the assistance of friends, left the tailgate at approximately 10 p.m. Security footage at the 21 Rio apartment complex captured Brianna and several of her friends entering the building and taking the elevator to a friend's apartment. Brianna intended to stay the night at the friend's apartment with several other girls. What happened after Brianna entered the apartment is still under investigation, but there is no doubt her intoxication ultimately contributed to her demise around midnight of November 28th, 2025. Brianna tragically fell 17 stories to her death. Her senseless death is the direct result of the defendants providing a minor with alcohol and overserving her to the point of extreme intoxication. Plaintiffs bring this lawsuit for all damages available to them under Texas law. And they are suing these folks in civil court. This lawsuit comes out, and shortly after, as a matter of fact, the same day, Tony Busby holds a press conference. And man, did he drop quite the surprise. He had a surprise witness that spoke at that presser. And rather than me cover what Tony and the witness had to say, I'm going to let you hear it from their own words. So here is that shocking press conference from Tony Busby.
Thank you all for coming. Of course, I have with me Stephanie Rodriguez, Brianna's mother, who is here. And the reason that we continue to pursue this and trying to figure out what happened that night is really because of her refusal just to accept what people are telling her that really doesn't make a lot of sense. A lot has happened since the first press conference we had back on December 5th. It's been 30 days. And now, more than we were 30 days ago, we believe even more today that this was not a suicide, as been suggested by the police. This was either an accident or something much more sinister. Although it's been 30 days, the police are no longer doing anything. They're certainly no further along than they were 30 days ago. And what we've seen is they're doing nothing. Their investigation lasted maybe a few days. They drew some hasty conclusions, and then they just quit. We've discovered, as you might imagine, since our last press conference, we've had a lot of people reach out to us. And the stories just keep coming over and over with the same refrain and the same theme, which is Austin Police Department, for whatever reason, does not thoroughly investigate deaths that occur in Austin. The investigation here lasted a few days, and then they did a hasty press conference and claimed that there was a suicide. This has become routine for the Austin Police Department, and it's extremely troubling when you can't count on law enforcement to thoroughly investigate. We expect more. This family expects more, and I think we all should expect more. I want to specifically note that there is a lot of misinformation on the internet and social media. I think you've probably seen it as well. The spread of this misinformation is hurtful and harms the legitimate investigation we are trying to conduct here. There are all kinds of nasty things floating around on Facebook and Instagram and otherwise. One of the refrains that I've seen here recently is that Brianna was an alcoholic, which is the most ridiculous thing that I think I've seen so far. This young woman rarely drank. She didn't engage in self-harm. She wasn't suicidal. She was active in the Texas A&M Pre-Law Society. She had plans to be a lawyer. She had recently registered for her next semester. She had declared her major. She wanted to study abroad. A review of her apartment and her effects of her apartment demonstrated very clearly that there was no suggestion whatsoever that this young woman contemplated hurting herself in any way, and frankly, there was no suggestion that she drank alcohol on a regular basis. So that kind of misinformation that's out there, it's very troubling. In most cases, it's page after page of artificial intelligence images and stories on Facebook and Instagram that churn out false headlines for views and clicks. I'm sure you've seen them as well. I'm not sure who's behind that foolishness, but it seems to happen every time there's something of note in the press, anytime there's something that's kind of a high-profile matter such as this. So I would caution everyone to be careful what you read and whether you believe it, because most of the stuff that you see on Facebook, Instagram, and the other social media sites is nothing but pure junk. It's been 30 days. In that time, we've expended substantial resources working to find the truth about what happened to Brianna Aguilera on the night of November 28th, 2025. We've engaged two different private investigation firms. The investigation firm of HRG Investigations even volunteered to take on this matter pro bono, and they've done a wonderful job of finding and interviewing witnesses and recovering data that we believe will be key to understanding what happened on that fateful night. Today we have with us Joel Gonzalez and Donovan Harmon of both of these two different investigation firms. They, along with us, have expended more than 200 hours investigating this matter, talking to witnesses, running down video, and et cetera. But there's a lot more work to do. But I want to personally thank them on behalf of this family for this important work. Now, I'm going to do something that's a little unconventional. You may recall that the last time we were together, I told you that we had already found witnesses that, turn that around if you don't mind, Ryan. We'd already found witnesses that absolutely demonstrate that the timeline put together by the Austin Police Department is complete and utter junk. This is the timeline that the police department laid out in their hasty press conference that they did the day before I did my last one. And there's some key entries on this timeline. They claim that there was a call that took place at 12:43 to 12:44 a.m. with someone else's telephone because Brianna didn't have her phone. And then they say at 12:46, the officers responded to a 911 call. And then, of course, it wasn't until 12 the very next day until the individuals that were still in that apartment decided to call the authorities to report Brianna missing. That's the timeline that has been provided to us by this, what they call a thorough investigation, but what we know to be just a hasty, thrown together, abbreviated look at the facts. I'm going to introduce you to an individual who was in the apartment immediately across the hall. She was in the apartment with her mother and her father, and her rendition of what happened that night, which she has a clear memory of, is completely different than what the police have suggested. Recall, I put this in context because it's important to understand what the police have said. They said that the three individuals in the apartment didn't know where Brianna was. They hadn't seen her for hours. They didn't realize that she was missing until 12:14 and finally called the next day, the afternoon of the next day. That's what these witnesses who were in that apartment said, okay? So let's make sure that this is all in context, that they hadn't seen her for hours, and that they finally decided, because they couldn't find her, to finally call the police afternoon the very next day. I want you to compare that with what you're about to hear from Dana Rodriguez, who was in the apartment immediately across the hall with her mother and father. Her mother and father also consistently say the same thing that you're going to hear from Ms. Rodriguez. Ms. Rodriguez?
Hello, my name is Dana Veronica Rodriguez. I am providing this statement on behalf of myself and my parents in hopes that this information will assist with the investigation into the death of Brianna Aguilera. Till this date, the Austin Police Department has not interviewed me or requested a statement. The only thing I have received from the Austin Police Department is a generic email sent to all residents of the 21 Rio apartment complex. I hope they listen to this statement and understand I am willing to cooperate in this investigation. I live at 21 Rio apartment complex on the 17th floor. On November 28, 2025, my parents were visiting me at the time and staying at the apartment. I was neighbors with Natalie. She literally lived right across from me. This is my apartment door to that table. That's how close we were, and the walls are very thin, mind you. My parents were visiting me at the time and staying at my apartment. I was neighbors with Natalie, Brianna Aguilera's friend. My front door faced her door. I believe I was neighbors with her for around a year or so. I ate dinner with my parents around 6 p.m. That evening. We enjoyed a lazy night together. I don't really like football, but my parents had it on the TV. I went back to my room after eating dinner and watched some movies. I heard through text messages and social media that UT had won the game against UT and A&M. I figured Natalie would throw a after party after what had happened to previous home games. She would usually throw some parties, after parties, pre-games. It was usual, so I was like, oh, okay, there's going to be some noise. The walls in my apartment are very thin. My room is right next to my door and the apartment facing across from me. In the hallways, I can hear everything, and inside Natalie's apartment, so this isn't new to me. Before November 28, 2025, heard her having parties and other people over conversating inside that specific apartment. At approximately 11 p.m., I began hearing people entering Natalie's apartment. Loud music began playing like a party started. I know this occurred at 11 p.m. because I was FaceTiming my boyfriend, and he kind of made a comment saying, "Oh my gosh, it's so loud I can hear the party from next door." After speaking with my boyfriend, I visited with my mom and took my dog Bear outside to use the restroom, but she didn't want to go. She wasn't cooperating with me. This was around midnight at the time. Bear did not want to cooperate, so I brought her back inside and asked my mom if she can take Bear outside. And it was kind of weird that my dog didn't want to go outside because around this time it wasn't really noisy. There wasn't a lot of people going in and out of our apartment. I think they were still at the tailgates or afters. This is the time that people were kind of just partying in their own apartments. I know the time was 12:15 a.m. because that's when I saw my mom returned with my dog Bear. And I also checked my phone when my mom entered the room. I tried to fall back to sleep in my room. My parents were trying to fall asleep in the living room in my apartment on an air mattress. At around 12:30 a.m., I woke up to people yelling at each other. It sounded like they were arguing. I then suddenly heard the sound of a large group of people leave Natalie's apartment. The loud music then was turned off. I recall checking my phone, and this occurred around 12:30 a.m. I tried to go back to sleep. A few minutes later, I began hearing a girl arguing with other people. It sounded like it was multiple people in the apartment pacing back and forth, so it was hard to recall what was said in the argument. I heard pacing back and forth throughout the apartment, like the arguing was coming closer to the door and heading to the back side of the apartment. My mother commented to me, "Oh my gosh, they keep arguing. I think I'm about to go over there and say something because it's really loud." And Bear, my dog, began barking a lot. She's, mind you, trained to let us know when a burglar comes or when someone's, making a lot of noise. And one thing my dog hates is arguing. So she was growling a lot towards my front door, towards the entrance of their apartment. Shortly afterwards, all of us heard loud screaming, the kind of screaming someone makes when you accidentally drop something. I was letting them know that it was like the type of scream when you drop like an heirloom that's really important and you're like, "Oh my gosh," like really bad, right? My mom commented that she thought maybe they dropped a drink inside, like a glass drink, and it made a mess everywhere and they broke something on accident. My dad said he thought the girls were arguing outside. He thought because he could hear the arguing from our own balcony, that's on the opposite side of their apartment, as if the voices were coming from outside. Anything that happens outside, we can hear everything because it just echoes. I recall my dad saying, "I hope they're not arguing on the balcony, God forbid." Eventually, the loud noises and arguments, screaming stopped. I could still hear conversations going on in Natalie's apartment. My understanding is Natalie immediately vacated her apartment after Brianna died. And over the Christmas break, my parents and I saw through the peephole. That's how close her door is. Her parents were grabbing things from her apartment, vacating out of the apartment. I do not believe the police were ever in Natalie's apartment during this investigation. My parents would have notified me. I would have known. That's how much I can hear the footsteps and everything from my apartment. The walls are just so thin. I hope this statement brings light to the situation. My heart goes out to Brianna and her parents. Thank you for listening to me today.
Excuse me, can you spell your name?
We'll get it for you. We'll get it for you. Okay. So I want you to put that in context with what we've been told previously. Previously, we were told that the people inside the apartment had been asleep for several hours, didn't know where Brianna was, and didn't know that she was really even missing until 12 the next day. What we just heard there is that there were arguing and fighting going on at 12:30 up until 12:45, and there was a lot of things pacing back and forth and that sort of thing. Now, what does that mean? That's why we have police. That's why we do investigations, and that hasn't been done. Recall, the police say that witnesses claim Brianna had a brief conversation with her boyfriend 2 minutes before the 911 call came, where she was found below dead. Police say she made that brief phone call to her boyfriend on a friend's phone. They've never been able to explain how did she get into her friend's phone if her friend was asleep. How did she return the phone to her friend if her friend was asleep. And now we've discovered that if you ask the boyfriend, that the last time he actually spoke to Brianna was at 9:44 p.m., not, as they suggest, at 12:43. Their timeline is completely trash. The owner of that phone, the phone that there was some sort of call was made to the boyfriend at 12:43, the owner of that phone supposedly had that phone in her possession the next day because Brianna gave it to her. How is that possible? It's not possible. And some of this may be saying, well, Tony, what does all this mean? What do you conclude from all this? It's not for me to make those conclusions. The reason that we have investigations is to talk to all the witnesses, look at all their phones, and get their stories in writing so we can compare them and figure out what happened. What the police have told us is simply not physically possible. Based on our investigation, we've concluded that Brianna didn't make that phone call herself, the phone call that the police claim that was made at 12:43 with someone else's phone. And what does it mean? It either means that if she did make that call, she was with someone else at the time the call was made, which would have been the time she went over that railing. Either scenario raises significant questions that warrant exploration. You just heard from this young woman who was across the hall. I think it's pretty evident that she might be somebody that the police would talk to first. Wouldn't you think? That she might be somebody that would be talked to first. You realize the way we found her is she gave an interview to a local news station the day after or 2 days after this happened. It's not like she's been hid away anywhere. This should suggest to you how terrible their investigation has been. You may recall that I referenced her 30 days ago during the last press conference. In 30 days, they made no effort to contact this young woman. And I think we can all agree that she has critical information to this investigation. Who was with Brianna on that balcony when she went over the balcony? Who was and why did she go over the balcony? That's the question, and the police don't seem to be interested in the answer to that question. We've been contacted by dozens of individuals who have reached out to offer the family assistance and support, and we want to thank you all for that. This family only wants the truth, no matter what that truth turns out to be. This family deserves the truth. They deserve more than simply jumping to conclusions or rushing to judgment. We all should expect more from the Austin law enforcement community. Unfortunately, what we've gotten so far is a terrible, shoddy investigation. You may recall the Austin Police Department, prior to our last press conference, rushed to hold their own press conference the day before. And in that conference, they stated their conclusion that Brianna's death was a suicide. And I want you to focus on that for a minute. Can you imagine how painful that would be to the parents of Brianna, for them to say that based on their shoddy investigation, they believe this to be a suicide? And they basically told us in their press conference, without so much as saying so, that their investigation was over, even knowing that we won't see an autopsy for months in the future. Once we had our press conference, you recall that they released a statement. They quickly walked back their hasty conclusion and said, oh, no, our investigation is very much open, and we have not concluded anything. Just literally completely 180-degree difference from what they had said previously. So you would think, okay, if your investigation's open, what witnesses have you spoken to since you gave your press conference? Well, they certainly haven't spoken to one of the most key witnesses, or her mother, or her father, or other people in that building, other people on the apartments adjacent or across the hall. I think we can all agree if there was an argument going on right around 12:45 that night, pacing and screaming and hollering, that's a lot different than claiming that we didn't know where this girl was because we were all asleep. They've never explained to us why the owner of that apartment, the lessee of that apartment, decided to vacate it immediately the very next day. That's never been explained to us. They've never explained to us if they've ever actually asked the three individuals in the apartment or the boyfriend for the telephone so they could look at the texts. The good news is I have some of those texts, and those texts do not match up with this timeline. They don't match up. The point is, this requires more investigation. I will tell you one thing the police department from Austin did do after the press conference. They contacted us. They asked us, hey, would you give us your witnesses? That's what they did. Is that how you expect your police department to operate? And I'll tell you what else they did. And this is probably most concerning. They told all of the witnesses not to talk to us. They told the three individuals that were in that apartment that night when this young girl died, they told them, do not speak to Brianna's mother or her lawyers. Now, why would they do that? What possible reason could there be for the police department in Austin to instruct people that were with Brianna at or around the time she died to not speak to Brianna's mother? You know, one of our investigators who's been doing this for 57 years commented to me, he says, Tony, I've never seen a group of witnesses so tight-lipped and refusing to talk to us. There was no foul play. Why would there be a reason not to speak to us? If the police have already decided that this was a suicide, why would the police also tell the witnesses, do not speak to Brianna's mother and do not speak to her lawyers? We've had many people reach out to us. Many have the same story about the Austin Police Department. The Austin Police Department is loath to dig deep. They look for the most expedient conclusion. One individual I talked to, a father, a very prominent person, and I won't mention his name, told me about his son's death in Austin. He said the Austin Police Department concluded within a few days that his son's death was a suicide. And his grieving father fought with the Austin Police Department for many, many months to get them to do their jobs. And I'm talking about a prominent person, somebody you would all know, someone who's familiar with government and the way it works and the way it's supposed to work. This man, in his grief, had to hire his own investigators. He had to go to court and get a court order to get a second autopsy done. He got no help from the Austin Police Department. They closed ranks on him, just like they're closing ranks here. And they treated him as if he were some type of wrongdoer, just because he was just wanting to find out what happened to his son. All he wanted to know was what happened to his son. He wanted the death of his son investigated properly. I mean, it's not like we're asking a whole lot. We're asking the police department to do its job, to talk to all the witnesses, tell us who you spoke to, what they had to say, and everything that you did, and tell us why you've reached this conclusion. They won't do that. They can't do that, because if they were to do that, they would be exposed as jumping to conclusions and not doing their work. So here's the problem. The witnesses who know the most will not speak to us. The Austin Police Department has told them very specifically not to do so. And for those that maybe the police department has not told that, they've decided not to do so on their own. And that raises a question of why. Because we prefer that they speak to us willingly. But let me be clear about something. Whether they do it willingly or they have to be forced to do it, they're going to speak to us. We also are not in a position to obtain all the phone records or texts. I specifically asked the Austin Police Department, did you review the texts of each person in that apartment and the boyfriend? He said, we have no ability to do that. Now, I take that at face value because unless you have a subpoena from a grand jury, you can't do that. I understand that. I'm not a fool. But you can ask, and if the witness says, I refuse to let you see my texts, then you can take another step. We're going to have to see the texts, all the texts. And if they don't do it willingly, we're going to force them to do it. We've spoken to every witness who will willingly speak to us. There are more to speak to. We reviewed all the texts we can get our hands on. There are more that need to be reviewed. So, to that end, today, we filed suit in Travis County State Court. We filed suit against the Austin Blacks Rugby and the UT Latin Economics and Business Association. The claims in that lawsuit are straightforward. Brianna was obviously overserved. That's even the police have concluded that. She was overserved at that tailgate. She was not 21. Obviously, many others were overserved there, many other people who were also minors. There are obviously laws that prohibit you from serving alcohol to minors, and there are laws that prohibit you from overserving people when you're serving them alcohol. By filing this lawsuit, not only will we hold accountable an entity or entities that were involved in overserving Brianna and other minors, but we will also be able to subpoena individuals and documents and video and data so we can continue our investigation. We will be able to compel witnesses so we can question them whether they want to or not. We will make available a copy of that petition that we filed last night to you. I think we have file stamp copies here. Through that case, not only will we hold accountable entities who we allege were overserving minors, but this will give us the ability to get to the bottom, once and for all, what happened that night. If the police department will not do their jobs, then we'll do it for them. So the takeaway from today's conference is this. We do not believe this was a suicide. We don't believe any of the facts whatsoever support that at all. We believe, based on our investigation, that Brianna was not alone in that apartment when she went over that railing. We don't know why she went over the railing. We're not suggesting anybody pushed her over the railing or anything in that sort at this point in time. We're simply saying that the witnesses that we have spoken to make it very clear that there was an argument that was taking place amongst several individuals in that apartment immediately before this young woman fell to her death. That's as far as we can go at this point. So the takeaway is this ain't over. This is far from over. We're going to get to the bottom of what happened, and now we're going to be able to do it with subpoena power and the power to compel the testimony of witnesses. And no matter what the answer turns out to be, no matter how painful it might be, we're going to get that answer. And I really appreciate your attention. And if you are a witness and you have information, please seek us out. We'd love to talk to you. It will make it as painless on you as possible. But this family wants to know what happened to their daughter. Thank you.
Tony, do you have a minute for this?
So there you have it. This lady was directly across the freaking hall. And here we are 2 months later, y'all, and never once have they interviewed her to this day. That, I'm sorry, is fucking inexcusable. Imagine that this lady has to get up at this press conference with Tony Busby and beg the police to interview her. It should be the complete other way around. As she said in that presser, she could hear everything. She said she could hear people yelling, arguing, multiple people. She then hears what sounds like a gasp, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, but a loud gasp, then nothing. Then quiet conversation. But remember, the police told us everyone was asleep. Remember that? This statement she made at the presser tells you everything you need to know and everything I kind of knew since the beginning of this case. And that is, there is some bullshit going on with this girl and something don't smell right. Period. I will, of course, keep you updated, but this is very concerning. Thank you so much for listening. Check out the Patreon, commercial-free early releases, bonus episodes. I just uploaded, prior to recording this, the actual indictment in the Tepe double murder case against Michael McKee. So that's already up on there. I've got some things I'm going to upload regarding the Brianna Aguilera lawsuit as well. I'm probably going to update the video version of that press conference on the Patreon. So you'll want to check that out. Patreon.com/exposedpodcastfiles. And until next time, for Exposed Scandalous Files of the Elite, I'm your host, Jim Chapman. Much love.